good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of AUA, Ask Anything. So, good morning, Josh.
Hey, Denny, what's going on? How's the weather in California here? It's gray sky on a winter day, typical Missouri winter, which they say,
Today we're supposed to have some kind of. Okay, we got a lot of stuff going on. So anyway, Josh, why don't you introduce today's topic?
Sure. Today we're, it's titled, help me out on the exact title. Qigong and Daoyin?
The one we agreed on is Qigong and Daoyin, but if you want to change, I can change it now.
No, that's great. So, Qigong. When Denny and I are coming up with ideas for the show, this one came up because here in the West, at least from my experience, we do get some Eastern teachings and have for a little bit, but one of the more popular ones would be yoga. But even in yoga, you only get the asana limb, in the mainstream, the postures, the stances, the positions. We get Buddhism has really kind of taken off and flourished somewhat here in a while. But this thing called Qi or Qi, and Qigong, and there's even a term Nigong that I heard about, and then we'll get into Daoyin, which is totally new to me whatsoever. So we might get bits and pieces, but as far as in-depth teaching on these and their benefits, I'm really looking forward to this. So probably get out of the way most of the show and let Denny give a presentation here. The other thing I wanted to mention here is, Denny is a retired professor at a major university, and I'm a university dropout, so maybe I still have a little bit of I don't know, kind of maybe resentment towards organized educational institutions, but gotten a lot better, but still like to poke a little bit at the established science. The thing is, though, even we need to learn about what's established science right now, and that's going to be a little bit of the presentation today. But the thing is, even if we don't agree with all of it or whatever, we still need to have that reference point for what needs to be, maintained, what needs to be amplified, and what needs to be maybe letting go of a little bit or opened up to. So the starting point is to learn about the established science as well. And so we'll get into some of that, while some of my work goes into some of the fringe stuff a little bit. But, even that we need, we'll talk about yin and yang, right? Knowing one without the other. The other thing is, though, what can bring us all together is this part of a sutta I plan to read at the end about, what should we really be interested in? There was a group of people that were confused about all these teachers coming to their town in the time of the historical Buddha, and they didn't know who to believe or what they should pay attention to, what they should study. And then the Buddha he lays it out of how to go about it, and his thing is really interesting about what to pay attention to, what to go by. And this is totally important in today's information age, where we can get flooded with information, and at the same time it's really opened up compared to 20, 30 years ago before the internet. So yeah. All right, Denny, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Yeah, so before the show, Josh and I talked about sort of the one of the deeper purpose of today's talk is to really really acknowledgement and understanding of the time that we're in. The time that we're in is called the information era, meaning that there should not be any resistance anymore to information. And so this is very different compared to maybe 2,000-3,000 years ago. So the stuff that we're going to be talking about is 2,000-3,000 years ago. And Josh and I are Buddhists. We study meditations and all that. And so Buddhism itself is very old. And the irony is that the people who are now, all of us who are now living in the information era, we still cling to those silos. But those silos exist because there were very high barrier to information. So if you study, with one master, and that's what you study. If you study with the Tao masters, you're the Taoist. If you study with the Buddhist master, you're a Buddhist. If you study with yoga, you are, with the yogi, you are now a yoga student, right? But I think that some of the things that you talk about, Josh, were I believe you have a resentment towards organized anything, not
Well,
just
see,
organized religion,
well,
but
it
not
used to
just
be,
organized education, but also
it used to
organized
be
religion.
really a lot worse or a lot more,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
now I'm open to that, and there's no
Well,
need to blame
the
anybody.
good
The
part
one thing I
about
want to say, though,
yeah,
real quick, Denny, is
sure, Joe.
I still don't consider myself technically a Buddhist. This is just the most comprehensive, accurate, helpful, skillful, wise
Yeah,
teachings that have been
yeah.
around that I haven't really found. That I found the least amount of dispute or the least amount of holes in issues in this. So that's why I study it so much and practice it. So.
Yeah, yeah. So that's right. That's right. So by the way, Buddha himself was the first guy that would acknowledge that he was not a Buddhist. So that's
That's
okay.
right.
You're in good company. You're in good company.
He never withheld teachings because they weren't Buddhist, right?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things because the question needs to be asked is that, what do we know about Taoism? Why do we talk about Taoism and Qigong and all that? And so the thing that I want to kind of present to all of us is that, hey, those barriers should not exist. We should study them. And what you find is that once you study them and digest and incorporate them, they're really different languages, but the tongue is the same. Right? Okay. So I think we should probably get going now. What do you think before we lose whatever audience we have?
Indeed, jump right in.
Okay. So the presentation today is called the Qigong. This is called Qigong. I'll explain that term in a minute. Versus Daoyin. Okay. And so one of the things that I wanted to kind of emphasize is because in the process of talking about this, we should also really reference the Western science, because if you want to kind of say Qigong, Daoyin, Buddhism, yoga, all those are kind of Eastern science. How does that compare to the Western science? Because one of the things that you're gonna find is that the Western scientists, I mean, some of them go out as far as saying that there is no such thing as qi, and there is no such thing as meridian, and there is no such thing. They would say that. And so rather than getting into an argument, I would propose something called experiential science that is based on experience, rather than science that is based on experiment. And so when you think about the Western science, the modern science, there are science that are based on experiments, whereas the Eastern science that are what we do is based on experience. So I hope that helps. So what is Qigong, right? What is that? And so when you mention Qigong, you have to kind of mention yin and yang and Tai Chi and all that. And so this symbol, everybody is familiar with this symbol for sure. So what does this symbol mean? And so typically when we look at this symbol, we say, well, that's yin and yang. Although most of us don't know what yin yang means, but it's A and B, right? So we know that. Actually, this symbol has a name. This symbol is Tai Chi. And so you would say, well, Tai Chi, isn't that the martial art? Well, it's the same name. It's Tai Chi. Now, the word Tai Chi this is the Chinese word. It's Tai Chi. Actually, this is a modern word. It used to be called Tai Xing, and Xing means basically perpetual, forever, something that is permanent. But more we don't use that anymore. We use the word Tai Chi. And Tai means supreme. Chi means pole or extremity. So Tai, for example, when we describe the sun, Sun, we say 太阳 is the supreme brightness. Okay, when we describe our great grandfather, we say 太公, right? So it's the grandfather, but beyond that. And if I introduce you to my wife, I will call her Tai Tai, which is the supreme. Okay, so let's just put things in perspective here. Now, G is interesting. G means pole, right? Extreme, the two extreme. So this means that the supreme extreme, the supreme polarization, the supreme pole. So the best way, and the best way to understand this symbol is to understand that it's actually three-dimensional. So it's actually a three-dimensional sphere. It's a three-dimensional sphere, and just happen to project on the 2D space. Okay. Now, what does that mean that you have a sphere with the pole like that? Well, one way to think about this is to think about the Earth, that the Tai G actually represents the Earth. And the Earth has the North Pole and the South Pole, but these are geometrical poles, right? And more permanent to the geometrical pole is what we call the magnetic pole. And the question is, where does the magnetic pole comes about? Why would we have a magnetic pole? Well, because the inside of our planet Earth, the inside is liquid, is lava, is molten metal, and so as the Earth rotates around the sun, it also rotates around its own axis, and so essentially you have these liquid metal slashing around inside the Earth, and when you have metal free electrons going, then that's current, and when you have current, then current generates magnetism, okay? And so when we have a straight wire, for example, then the magnetic field is in circle. But on the other hand, if the wire is in circle, then the magnetic field is straight, okay? So that's one way to think about it. So because you have these current goes around the planet, then it generates a magnetic field, okay? It generates a magnetic field. Now today, the moon has no magnetic field. The moon actually has no magnetic field because the moon is solid. There's no liquid inside. Now, obviously the planet Earth is not the only planet that generate magnetic field, right? Because we have a much bigger planet called the Sun that generate magnetic field because of all the activity. And so the magnetic field on the planet Earth is heavily influenced by the magnetic field on the sun. In fact, the sun not only emits magnetic field, it emits particles, ions, charged particles. So those charged particles would be very destructive to the living beings on planet. Now, fortunately, because of our own magnetic field, then it deflects some of those iron, what's called the solar cloud, okay? In fact, someone argued that it was, if you read the development of the universe, once upon a time, billions and billions of years ago, when the universe was being developed, the moon used to have a magnetic field. And it was argued that it was because of that it was able to protect us and deflect much of the bombardment from the sun. And that's one of the reasons why out of all the planets that we know, Earth is the one that has developed life form. So interestingly, the Chinese people, thousands and thousands of years ago, they might not be able to describe it. They might not be able to perform scientific experiment, but they have the experience that they can pass on from generation to generation. And they understood that a lot of our existence on the planet Earth is heavily influenced by our universe. And although they couldn't quite describe it as electromagnetic interactions, they know that there are two things going on. They know that there's the life form, the life itself generates electricity, and then the electricity generates magnetism. The magnetism is the one that interacts with the universe. So this is the way the modern science look at it. Now, of course, The only thing that right now, we're making progress. We're actually making progress in terms of understanding the electromagnetic radiation, electromagnetic wave energy of a human body. For example, we are now able to detect the electromagnetic disturbance that come up from our heart. So as our heart pumps blood, blood is conductive because it contains iron, and as the blood gets in and out of the heart, it generates a magnetic field, and we are now able to detect that magnetic field. We're not able to detect magnetic field on any other part yet, but at least on the heart, because it's the major part, we could. Now we also understand that for example, one example that people use is like twins. Somehow they have this telepathic way of communicating out each other, even if they're, and people conjecture that might be our brain generating electromagnetic wave, and that's how couples, the identical twins. It's kind of ironic if you think about it. It's kind of ironic that the Western scientists really understood the electromagnetic interaction. If they didn't understand electromagnetic interactions, if Maxwell didn't come along and integrate what would be known as electricities and what would be known as magnetisms, we wouldn't know how to generate electricity, and we wouldn't know how to have communication. I mean, telegraph was because we understood. The earliest form of communications was because we finally understood electromagnetic interaction, but yet Western science doesn't even attempt to understand the electromagnetic interactions in the body, whereas the Chinese, they have done that. They have done that for thousands of years. Okay, and so we actually have come up with this really complicated set of knowledge that has to do with our magnetic presence, and we call these the meridians, because these are actually lines of energy running through a body, and we call it meridians because it's like the planet where you have the lines that runs up and down and the lines that runs on the sideway. So these lines are very complicated. They're very, very complicated. So there are 12 what's called a secondary vessel that 6 of them comes from our fingers and 6 of them comes from our toe. There's another 8 that are called the supreme vessels, and the 2 that goes from our stomach in the back to the top of the head and then down. One is called the governing and one is called the conceptual, and there's 4 more. And then those are the meridians. They just and then there's hundreds that goes across. Okay, so also altogether they're close to 720 these called the energy points. So these set of knowledge were developed by the Chinese generations after generations by really preserving the experience. So this is a science that is based on experience as opposed to science that are based on what you can see and what you can hear and what you can smell. Okay? So the question is that how come the scientists are not able to see that? I mean, they're trying everything they could to really, they understand the effect. They know that you can do acupuncture on someone while doing open heart surgery, and the guy could be looking at you and smiling while you're doing an open heart surgery. That's amazing. So they accept all that. They accept the Eastern medicine, but yet they couldn't find it. They can't find it. And one reason that they can't find it is that they're looking at the wrong place. It's the same as saying that, well, how come after all this investment we still couldn't find extraterrestrial? Because you're looking at the wrong place. So this chi, this electromagnetic energy in the body should not be should not be considered as part of a body. So if you're trying to go to a body to look for this network of chi, you're never going to find it because it's not part of a body. So the only way you can really understand that is that our existence is based on a body, which is physical, and a chi, which is energetic. So in other words, there is a physical body, which consists of the flesh and blood and the bones and the tendons, all the things that you can do experiment on. And then there's a separate body There's almost like one superposed on another. That is totally separate. They're related, but they're separate. That's what we call the chi body. So if you want to understand this, don't think of this as something that is inside a body, but think of it as an energy field that is closely related to our body, but is separate. And you can eventually do experiment on that, but until then, you can experience it. And the Chinese people have experiences for a long, long time. So I want to just quickly, and because this, first of all, this diagram is for illustration, it's not very accurate, because I don't want to refer that to the practice that we do. So when we practice on Saturday, we have the first part that we alternate. And so every other week we would practice what we call the meridian lines, patting the energy points and so forth. And I always point to the 6 meridians in the hand, and 3 of them, and these meridians points actually associate with your organ. Okay, so the 3, one starts at a thumb. That's for the lung. The one that starts in the middle finger is for organ that is not recognized in the Western science. That is what we call the pericardium. Peri means perimeter. We all actually, the Chinese people actually consider what's around the heart as a separate organ. Okay, the network of vessels and muscles outside. So this is called the pericardium. And then finally, the finger, the small fingers is what we call the heart. Now, in the Chinese medicine, it's more than the heart. It's actually the heart plus there's a hormone gland, what we call the thymic gland, that is above our heart. So when the Chinese people, when they think about the heart, they don't think about just the thing that is pumping. They actually associate the heart with your mental wellness. And the scientists finally figured out that there is a hormone that is excreted by this gland called the happy hormone. But the Chinese people knew about that. So they know about it. So these are that's the 3 that emanates from the extremities back to the organ. And then there's 3 that goes from the organ to the hand, but not necessarily to the tip. So the small intestines, the bowel, the large intestines. And then there's one more organ that is not recognized by the Western science called the triple warmer. So basically, it's the entire upper torso that is separated into 3 parts: what's above the membrane, what's between the membrane and the belly button, and what's below the belly button. So there's 3 parts. So those are the 6, the 6 in the hand, and then there's 6 more that comes from the toes that has to do with the rest of the organ. But out of that, so we there's a bunch of, so there's about 12 of these organs. 12 of these organs, some of them recognized by Western science, some of them not. But actually out of that 12, the 5 most important one is the lung, the heart, the kidney, the spleen, and the liver. And out of that 5, we call the lung the king of the 5. And so in the Chinese medicine, the lung is not something that just breathe. The lung is actually the source of all positive energies in the body. And that's why we work on this energy point. And one of the questions that Josh had asked is that why is this point so important? This is what we call this one right here is called the gate to the cloud. It's actually the last point. This is the center finger is the first. The thumb is the first point. It travels through this right here. This is very important. That's why when we pat here, and then it travels all the way up to the gate of the cloud. And the reason it's called the gate of the cloud is that think about how you would nourish the planet Earth. You have to absorb water. Water becomes cloud, and then from the cloud it distributes to the rest of the earth. So the cloud is very important. So this is the cloud. This is the gate, the cloud for the lung, for the entire nutrition delivering system, which is based on the lung. The lung is the king of the 5. So
Denny,
interestingly,
jump in here real quick.
Go ahead, Josh.
And that's, you think about it, because we can't, you could live maybe a week without water or something like that, 2 weeks, or maybe a month or so without food, a couple months. But there's only like a maybe some people that can hold their breath maybe for what, a minute, maybe 5, 10 minutes tops. You have to breathe continuously. The other thing was the spleen. Yeah, Western science, they just don't really have any comments much on what the spleen, the importance of the spleen as well. And yes, the pericardium, never hear really about the importance of that. And then the heart, linked with the mental health. Yeah, the way maybe to look at it, an additional way is if somebody has a broken heart, a lot of times they're completely, devastated mentally for a while, right? And that's language, so as well. And then I guess the gallbladder, right, meridian runs on the middle finger or the smaller finger as well, right?
The gallbladder runs from the toe, from one of the toe, if I
One of the
understand right.
toes.
One
Okay.
of the toe. And one of the things that for example, the gallbladder is actually very, very important from the Chinese standpoint because the gallbladder actually, the gallbladder and the kidney is a pair, okay, both of which are responsible for the cleansing of the toxins in the body. So the gallbladder is actually very, very important in that sense. I'm sorry, I'm the gallbladder and the liver. Sorry. The gallbladder and the liver. I misspoke. That the cleansing is the kidney and the bladder. I just jumped. So anyway, let me go on, and I just want to mention that in the five breathing exercise that Master teach, which is the part that we alternate. And so that's 5-set exercise has multiple purpose. First of all, it's a meditation technique. Okay, it's based on movement. Second of all, it actually we practice abdominal breathing, and I'll come to that on the next slide how important that is. And finally, it delivers oxygens to these five critical organs. The first set has to do with what's above the membrane, and so that's the lung and the heart. And then when we do the push hand, then it's pushing oxygens below the membrane, which go to the kidney, the liver, and the splint. And finally, when we do the very last one, up and down, is to deliver oxygen to the kidney. So more to Josh's point is that oxygen is really, really important because you can't with no oxygen you just can't survive. If the air quality, right? If you breathe bad quality air, like you live in an environment that has a lot of pollution, that's bad for your health. But also think about all the diseases that we have. Why do we have cancer? Cancer doesn't come from a virus. It doesn't come from a bacteria. It's how your body survive because there's a lack of oxygen. It's on the cellular level is because somehow you couldn't deliver oxygen to your cell, and then the cell has to find a way to survive. So instead of surviving on oxygen, they survive on something else, and that's what we call cancer.
And
Same thing with
then it like feeds on sugar, right? And it reproduces
So
without any purpose. Just that's its whole purpose.
It's like Starbucks. There's a whole new species that survive on silicon.
Yeah. So a distinction that when you say membrane, you're talking about the diaphragm, right?
The diaphragm. I meant the diaphragm in Chinese.
No, it's a membrane. Yes.
Yeah, it's a membrane. Okay. So before I leave that slide, I just want to mention that there's three pressure points, three energy points that are critically important. And the Chinese actually think of that as the sky, the earth, and the man. Now, man as in men and women, okay? So you would notice, and I emphasize that during our practice, that it's very important that when you stand with this pressure points pressing down on the ground. So this pressure point is, if I translate it, it would be called a gushing spring. It's like the spring gushing, like the old faithful, coming out from in Yellowstone Park. It's the energy gushing out from the planet Earth. So when you stand, it's very, and it's located if you put your feet up, there's the toe and there's a pad, right? There's a, and then just right there, there's a cavity, and so that's called I'll translate it into the gushing spring points. And so when you stand, make sure that you stand properly, pressing it down. Now,
Some people call that the arch of the foot as well.
the arch of the foot. Thank you. Now, the other point is that it's right on the top of the head, but it's not at the top of the head as much as is in the apex. And the only way that the apex is pointing up is if you lean back and then tuck in your chin, and now it's on top. And so when you sit in meditation, you always have to do that, and then you always have to open up these 2 points to form a triangle. And then finally, right in the middle of your palm, and it's hard to translate. It just literally would be labor was the first word, and then palace. I don't know why that is. It's a place where a lot of work are being done. Okay, so if you want to know that, it's the second point of the one that has to do with the pericardium, and just lower your middle fingers right there. Now, what's interesting about this part is that unlike the other two, in addition to absorbing energy, it can actually give out energy. And so all the healing and self-healing is done with this point. So when we pat a shoulder, it's with this part. Okay? All right. Now,
I'd make a real quick comment about the working thing. You know, the humans, you don't see animals working much. You don't hear about, demons or angels or other beings working much. But man, because of the, we have an opposable thumb, they can do labor, right? Physical labor. I don't know.
yeah, no, I agree with that. I think if you look at how humans have evolved over the years, you can go back to what is called the Homo erectus, which are the people that actually stand up straight, with the back. But that's not the beginning of evolution. The beginning of evolution is discover this. Because if you didn't have this, you couldn't hold a stick, and you couldn't hold a stick, you couldn't protect yourself. And what's the point of walking down the street, the tree? This is, and sometimes when I look at Qiqong, there's a lot we do a lot with the thumb because it's the first part of a body, first part of the evolution. It's very interesting.
Yes, it's what distinguishes us from other creatures, pretty much, or one of the things.
Yeah. Now, so when we do Qigong, when people do Qigong, forgive me, I don't do Qigong. I don't want people to think that I have anything to Qigong. I'm interested in Qi. Qigong is something else. I'll explain that in a minute. So someone asked me, I remember last week, Josh, I don't know if you were there, then he asked me a quick question. So what is the difference between what you do in Qigong? I said, well, we practice Qi as a journey. We don't practice Qi as the destination, right? We're drive-by Qigong guys. Qi is a vehicle for our practice. I'll come to that in a minute. All right. So if you think about Qi as an energy field and think of the Qi as a separate body, Qi body, and if the Qi is fluid and there's no blockage, it actually influence our body in a good way. And so it's not clear which one is the cause and effect. So if you suffer illness, your Qi is going to be very bad. Okay? But if you work on your Qi so that there's no blockage, it will affect your body. All right. So that's why we do that. And when you do that, then you have to understand that these 12 called the secondary vessel has to do with an internal organ. And it also has to do with the extremities, fingers and toe. But it turns out that there's 8 more. There's 8 more that are inside our body. And most people don't talk about 4 of them because they actually don't have, interestingly, they don't have any energy points associated with them. And it's only the people who practice Qigong that uses them. So for example, there's one called the, I forgot the name, but don't worry. The 4 are not important for our conversation, but there are 2. There are 2 that are extremely important. So think of these 2 as like the boulevard, like in San Francisco, it would be called the Market Street. This is the huge boulevard that runs through. And then you have these tripullaries that connects to the main boulevard. So the 12 are connecting to this main boulevard. And so can you imagine if you have blockage on the main highway, then that's not going to work, right? And so one of the practice we do, in addition to working on the tripullaries, is that we also work on the main highway, right? And so the main highway, So there's two vessels. One is called conception vessel, which is in the front of the body, and one is called the governing vessel, which is in the back of the body. So this is called the governing vessel. It is actually the most important vessel. Okay, so think of this. Don't think of this. Don't think of this as organ or think of this as a highly conductive conduit for electromagnetic energy. Okay, which just happened to coincide with your body. So it starts at the very bottom, essentially the last part of your spine where we used to have the tail. You know, back in the days when we were still up the tree and we had the tail, that's where we come from. And it goes all the way up to the top of the spine, continues up on the neck to the back of the head, and then it goes to this point that I mentioned, which is called this one right here is called the Daoyin meeting. And you notice that it's in the back of the head. So that's why you have to tuck in your chin for it to go up to the, and then it goes all the way to the forehead, to the nose, to the bridge, and all the way down. So this is called the governing vessel. And then the conceptual vessel kind of coincides, starts with the forehead and goes all the way down to something called dantian. Now the word dantian, I didn't really explain it here. Tan is feel. Dan is we can say that it's a fire. It came from the days when, back in the days, before Bodhidharma came to China, before Bodhidharma really introduced the meditation technique to China, that the Taoists, they were actually alchemists. Okay, so they were, when they call Dan, is actually a pill, a ball of fire. And so they actually swallow this ball of fire. And of course, once they learn meditation, then they still use the word. So when they say swallow Dan, they meant the chi now. Okay, now this is actually a very important diagram because one of the questions that Josh asked me was the word qi, because keep in mind that Chinese language, you cannot just take one word and interpret because it depends on how you conjugate. So the word qi, for example, hong qi is air. You have to conjugate it with the word that means space. So that's the air, that's the, and then it just goes on and on like this, okay? So the word qi could mean breathing, and it could mean like energy that has to do with the blood. The blood flows and carries energies into. So which one is which, and what's the relationship? The relationship has to do with the dantian. Okay, so the word dantian means, the dan means fire and tan means feel. Now, the Chinese people, they actually believe that what's called the dantian is the second brain. So they actually call this the lower dantian, and they call the brain the upper dantian. Now, again, we're talking about energy field. So this is a separate body, a chi body, that happens to coincide with the physical body.
And Western science calls that the gut brain.
The gut brain. Okay, very good, very good. So because, but they for different reason, they think more about the bacteria and the.
That's right. Yeah, so it's not exactly the same. Yeah.
Now, why is this the brain or the brain of the? I don't want to use brain because brains distract us. So just say, why is this the place where you store the energy? The reason where the dantian is important is that what's in the dantian? What is in the lower part of our stomach? Small intestines and bowel, or what you call the small and the large intestines. So if you were to kind of stretch out that small intestines and the bowel, it's 6 times the height of every human being. So a tall person will have more and a short person will have less, but it's always going to be approximately 6 times the height. That's a lot of surface area. That's a lot of surface area, right?
That's a lot of feces too, right? No, sorry, it's family friendly here. So
so that's a lot of surface area. And so one of the when people practice qi, they might not understand that, but turns out that our body conducts electricity because every biofunctions is essentially electricity, right? Blood, nerve, muscle, brainwave, everything is electricity. But in addition to that, our body can also generate electricity because every part of our body is piezoelectric. So if you were to take a bone and you bend it, it generates static electricity. If you take an intestine and pull it, it generates static electricity. So and the storage of the electricity is not a battery as much as it's a capacitor. Okay, so we actually generate electricity and we store it. And so it turns out that the dantian, your lower stomach, your abdomen, is the place where you store all your qi, all your electromagnetic energy, all the electrostatic energy. Okay, so and what you want to do is you want to supply that to the second dantian, to the second brain. And it turns out that the spiral cord is a good way to do that. It's very, very conductive. Okay, but in order to take that electrostatic energy to then propagate it to the brain, you need to make it into electromagnetic energy. And the electromagnetic energy comes from the mind. Okay, comes from the mind. And so when we do this part, this is called the microcosmic orbit, because the macrocosmic orbit is the universe. This is how they define it. The microcosmic orbit is the human being. Okay, so you first have to practice your abdominal breathing. And Master teaches about that. He called it intentional breathing. Breathe in, open your stomach, lower the diaphragm. Breathe out, raise your diaphragm, collapse the stomach. And as you do that, you're exercising your intestine. And so one of the questions that was asked last week was, what do you do with constipation? Well, it turns out that this is one of the side benefits, because you're constantly exercising your small intestines, which is really your primary digestive system. And so your constipation goes away. Your cholesterol goes away. Okay, and so anyway, going back to the dantian, going back to abdominal breathing, you generate static electricities, and then you use your mind. As you breathe in, your mind travels up all the way to the forehead, and as you breathe out, you travels all the way through the front of the body. So these are the two. This is the governing vessel, and then this is the conceptual vessel. These are the two main vessels that are not associated with our inner organ.
And Denny, the name on these, sorry to interrupt, they're really interesting. The governing vessel and the conceptual vessel. For what's coming to me now, the governing has spine is with the nervous system, right? So our nervous system communicates with all the other systems in our bodies. I don't. Yeah, tell me. You're going to jump in here and help or correct me and help me out. In the conceptual, this is how we interact with the world, right? Is through the front part of our body.
Yeah, unfortunately, I could go on and explain if I knew what the Chinese word means. Except that the Chinese word I couldn't explain that. Even the Chinese one is called tok. I don't understand. So
well, I like that. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yes. But it is the governing, because when we call the governor, we would say the main tok, zhong tok. So I can understand it. It's okay. Yeah. So this is the exercise that we do, and now you would say, well, how is that different from the kind of meditations that the Buddhists would do? And Master actually has the word for this. This is the samadhi for the karma realm. The realm of these bodily sensations. Okay.
The desire realm too, right?
The desire realm. I'll explain that, and then the Buddhas actually, if you do it right, it's for so it's more like stages. Okay, more like stages. All right. So next one we're gonna is I think that's interesting. So let's go back to the word qi. Let's go back to the word qi. Now, this is an old word for qi. So thousands of years ago, when the Chinese people talk about qi, they use this word. And so if you break it down, it's made up of two words. The one on the top means nothing, no, empty, void. The four dots in the middle means fire. So in the very beginning, in the old days, qi means no fire. So actually what they were talking about is really hormonal imbalance. So they discovered through experience that a big part of a health depends on the balance of a hormone And they identified three of the gland that are associated with the state of health. And I mentioned earlier that in the Chinese, when they say heart, it's both the heart that pumps blood and the gland that sits on top of the heart, which is called the thymus gland, which excretes what is now called the happy hormone. Okay? So they understand that. They also understand that.
Oxytocin, just so I jump in there.
Okay, thank you.
That's technical.
Okay.
Right.
Now it turns out that they also believe that our regenerative organs are very important to achieve. The testicles that stores the sperms and the ovary that stores the egg. Okay, they actually have a name for that. These are the original essence of a body, and you better not give it away. That's why it is so important for the Taoists and the Buddhists to abstain from sex, both sex with a partner and sex without a partner, because they believe that those are the essence, and you better keep it. What's even more interesting is that aside from that, they really understood adrenaline gland. And the adrenaline gland is the one that gives out the fire. And so if you use modern science, what they were really talking about is the two nerve system and the consequence of these two nerve systems that we call the sympathetic nerve versus the parasympathetic nerve. The sympathetic nerve is what we call the fight or flight. So from our evolutions, once we discovered the little thing called the thumb, and we know how to hold on to weapons, and then we descend from the tree, we walk among predators. We developed this nerve system called the fight or flight. And it starts with the brain. The brain sees danger. First thing it does is that it dilates the pupil, so you want to absorb as much light as possible, increase your peripheral vision. It pumps the heart by going to the adrenaline gland, so it pumps out cortisol. So that's steroid. Pumps the heart. It dilates the lung, so you can breathe. You need oxygen because you're getting ready to either fight or flight. And actually, one thing that they don't mention here is that it shuts down the salivary gland because you don't need it anymore. The salivaries are very important to your health, right? Often overlooked by the Western scientists. Then it starts to activate the liver because you need glucose, you need energy, okay? And I talked about the adrenaline gland already. It gives out all the hormone, the three kinds of hormone, the cortisol plus two kinds of adrenaline. It shuts down the stuff that you don't need. It shuts down the stomach, shuts down the bladder, and shuts down your reproductive system. So that puts us in that mode where we are energized. Unfortunately, modern people don't know how to shut it down. We are in fight or flight mode 24/7. Maybe not so modern. Maybe back in the days, the Chinese people understood that too. So think about what happens if you sustain in that mode for any length of time. First of all, your liver releases fatty acid, triglyceride. So that causes problem with your cholesterol. You now have high blood pressure, right? Your salivers, your stomachs, you're not digesting, you're going to have very bad health. So all this stuff is really, really bad for you. And so with Qigong, Tai Chi, meditation, yoga, dancing, whatever, they all have one thing in common, which is to put you back in this rest and digest mode, which reverse that chemical process by going into this thing called the parasympathetic nerve. So it essentially reverses everything. Okay, so the Chinese people, they understood that. They understood that before they understood anything else, which is that our health depends on a balance of a hormonal system. And if your hormone is out of balance, then you have too much fire because you have too much of the steroid, too much of the adrenaline. And so the Qigong, the Qi in the very beginning is about that. It's about releasing that. Now, over the thousands of years that the qi or the development, the enhancement of qi, the qigong, there are different things. Okay, so we're now going to talk about the different kinds of ways that you can enhance qi. But before we do that, I want to borrow a diagram from Dr. Yang. Dr. Yang and I have something in common. He's about 10 years older than me. We both have a PhD in mechanical engineering, and we both decided that it's time to pursue something else. So he pursued Qigong. He actually learned martial arts when he was 15, and so look that up. He's very, very good. And I like this chart. And he says, because he asked a simple question, what is Qigong? What is Qigong? Now, first of all, I'll explain Qigong in a minute, but Qigong is essentially the practice of Qi. How do you practice Qi? And basically he says, well, what if you just go play golf, or you just run around the block? Is that qigong? He said yes. It's a matter of whether you use more of your body or you use more of your energy. And so if you use entirely your body, you would generate qi, but that's exercise. And you use less of your body, and you're doing meditation, sitting meditation, then that's Qigong, but now you use more of your Qi. So I like that because it puts this in perspective. Now, the word Qi has evolved, and so it went from the old form, which is no fire, to this other form, this other characters, which is a combine of air and rice. So I remember Josh said that one time he heard someone says that the word qi comes from the sound that you make when you cook rice. I don't have any problem with that discussion.
Oh, hang on. Just I thought they said like sometimes the pot or the lid would just fly off unexpectedly. I can't remember. Sometimes it would do that, and sometimes it wouldn't. And that sound would approximate qi.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Now, I think Dr. Yang has a better, I like Dr. Yang's explanation. He says, well, qi is energy. And where do you get the energy? You get it from air and you get it from carbohydrate. Okay? So that's your existence, right? Now, what's interesting is that if you think about all the ways that people associate themselves with qi, how do you enhance qi, or how do you develop qi? Meditation, right? So this is the one where you focus more on an energy and less on your body. Or you focus more on your body. So Tai Chi, Qigong, Yi Jing Jing. Or you focus on combination. Okay? Because you can do walking meditation, right? And also when you do Tai Chi and Qigong, you're supposed to also be mindful. So you can't just have one without the other. Okay? And finally, we can do physical therapies to enhance the qi, acupuncture, cupping. Okay, cupping is not that well known until a few years ago. And all of a sudden, all the athletes now start to cup. They come out with these little dots on the body. Massage or acupuncture, pressure, right? These you can use to enhance your qi. Food, very important. The concept of hot food, cold food that are nutritious, or to go beyond to that, food that has less pollution, air quality. You could have herbal supplements too. People talk about ginseng as really good for your qi. People talk a lot about the environment and how you want to align with the positive energies. I mean, people go to park and hug trees as part of enhancing the qi. So the sun, the moon, the earth, that's obvious. Turns out that Jupiter is the biggest star in the universe, has a lot to do with our qi. And then finally, you can go extreme and talk about your original essence and how you preserve or regulate your hormone, focus on your adrenaline gland or your kidney, or preserving your sperms and your eggs by abstaining from sex of any kind.
Denny, one thing that's really jumping out here is the previous slide was that meditation used qi and energy, but now to enhance it, we have meditation on here. So how does that work? Because enhance means something different than using, right? because yeah, it's maybe we can for some
No,
other.
no, actually, I think it's worth discussing because let me go back to the slide. This slide. The question, I think deeper question is that which one is better for you? Which one does the most efficient jobs in enhancing your chi? On the very first time that we live cast on Restream, I'm sorry, on Insight Timer, a question was asked, what do you do with pain? And I jumped and I thought that he was talking about chronic pain. And I said, if you have chronic pain, you should go see the doctor. But what we do is suffering, really suffering is mental pain. When I thought about it some more, if I have a chance, I will ask him again. Because a lot of times they talk about pain in practice. What happens when you sit and all of a sudden you have pain? What do you do with that? Do you make it go away? How do you do that? And so if I might not be, again, I'm very good in not answering questions. But if I understand your question correctly, is that how is sitting meditation compared to walking meditation, for example? Which one is better in developing chi? I would answer it this way. There are 4 postures: sitting, standing, walking, which is exercise, and then lying down. And we are the only animal that's capable of all 4. Okay, so why not use all 4? We're the only species that can do. So why don't we use all 4? So the Chinese word for the 4 posture is actually the 4 supreme posture. So in other words, it puts it on a pedestal. So if I were to answer the question again, I would say just change posture if you have pain. If you sit for a long time, just stand up.
And that's the thing, right? There's a few teachers that say movement mask suffering. Because what happens if you're sitting in meditation, the pain gets so unbearable. A lot of times the natural tendency without training is just to move, because that kind of covers up the actual pain, right? Or you don't notice it, as if you would continue to sit still, right?
Yeah, you become numb. You become numb to the pain, right?
Well, that can happen too.
Now, because Master's teaching is it goes further than that. He actually associates each posture with an element. And so sitting is earth, standing is fire, lying down is water, and walking is wind. And so he talks about how the 4 has to interact, and that actually enhances the chi. So my answer, if I understand your question correctly, is that there is no one posture, but it's the balance all 4. Right.
Very well. Yeah, I was just thinking that, sitting meditation, it seems sometimes like it doesn't really necessarily give me more energy, but it kind of balances out rough energies a lot of times, especially walking. Walking does it beautifully. If you have too much energy, it slows us down, or lowers it a little bit, balances it. But if we don't have enough, then walking will help bring back up the energy levels as well. So
correct. So it's very important to balance the 4 posture. It's very important to utilize the synergy between the 4, and it's also very important to realize that there's these 2 cliffs. So if you're talking about the Tao as a road, as a path, and you're meditating along this path, that you really understand that there's this 2 cliffs. And it has to do with the 5 hindrances. One is the sleepiness and the torpid, right? And then the other one is the highly energized states, which is like the anxiety. And so you could fall into those cliffs while sitting too long, because then you go into one side. That would be called the lazy Zen. You just sleeping basically through your sit. And then the other one is called the monkey Zen. Where you look like you're sitting, but your mind is someplace else. So these 2 are 2 of the 5 hindrances. And so one of the magical thing about Master's teaching is that it really gives you that balance. So you have the energy, the chi to support you, so that you don't fall into the sleeping part. And yet, because of the qi, you can now focus your mind onto this one part and stay away from the thinking. So instead of using your brain as an analytical tool, which is right next to yourself, your seven consciousness, it takes it away and focus on just being aware of your breath and the time. Okay, so it's very magical. Anyway, this is not going to be done in 1 hour, but that's okay, unless you have to go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about qi versus qigong. Now, I'm going to say this by saying that Qigong is actually a very new word, and I'll explain why that is. Okay, but for now, because it's used so often now, once we say Qigong, we kind of know what that means, because the word Qigong, sorry, the word, this is Qi and this is Gong. This is actually made up two words. On the left hand side means work. On the right hand side means effort. So Qi Gong just means the practice of Qi. That's all it means. And so if you think about how modern people practice Qi, there is something called the medicine Qi, the medical Qi Gong, right? The practice of Qi for the purpose of medical benefit. So this would be acupuncture, understanding the energy points and the influence of energy points on the health. Traditional Chinese medicine, herbal tea, all that. So that would be Qi Gong, which is the practice of Qi for the purpose of medicine. The second one is physical Qi. And so this is not unlike yoga. Once yoga came to the United States, the yoga that is practiced in the United States is what we call hatha yoga. Physical, very forceful. It's an exercise. And so you could actually take Qigong, the practice Qigong, and focus it mainly on the physical, the physical body. Now, but on the other hand, one will argue that that's the entry, and as the persons get more advanced, he will go back to the mind, which is, kind of combination like that graph where you start with the physical, the body, and then eventually you go to the energy part. So Yi Jing Jing is also like that. And although I'm not going to talk about Yi Jing Jing that much, there's like at least 3 different variants of Yi Jing Jing. Then there's what's called the scholarly Qigong, the practice of Qi purely for knowledge and a peace of mind. So to be fair, we call it mindfulness a couple of times ago. I'm going to call this Mik Qigong, okay? To be fair, okay? So finally, there is something called the spiritual Qigong. The spiritual Qigong is not that different from Buddhism. The purpose of Buddhism on the spiritual level is to escape from samsara so that you come back in a better form. Now, turns out that, so again, now let's go back to Qigong. When did Qigong came from? It's very recent. It's actually very recent. It's less than 60 years old. I want to talk a little bit about the modern history of China. So China was invaded by the Japanese. We actually fought a very long war, much longer than the Pacific War. And so when we dropped the atomic bomb, that was the end of World War II, as well as the end of the Chinese-Japanese War. So after that, there was a civil war between the communists and what's called the nationalists, and that lasted 3 years. And so in 1949, the communists took over China, kicked out the nationalists. They went to Taiwan, and so there's 2 China now. And they basically, quote, liberate China. But because they're communists, communism come from Germany. Communism is actually science. It's a social science. It's a form of social science. And like all science, it's all about our material existence. It's not about our brain, our mind. There's no God. No, it's not a religion. Although I would argue that by saying that you don't believe in God, it's a religion by itself. Atheism is a religion. So then they decided that they were going to undo all the religious practice in China. They took all the monks and moved them out of the temple, destroyed the temple, make all the monks go back to the household life, force them to eat meat, force them to have sexual intercourse. They do the same thing with the Taoists. Now, I was born in 1956, so I remember when I was about 1.5 years old. I actually remember, most people say you don't remember anything before you're 3. I actually remember a lot before I was 3. So my younger brother was 3 years younger than me. And I remember that one visit very well from Macau, which is outside of mainland. And we crossed the border to visit my grandfather. And I remember my mom was not pregnant because they went to swim in the river. So I had to be less than 2 years old. And I remember, so 2 years old means 1958, and China was very peaceful, very nice. People were helping each other and all that. Well, it turns out if you look at the history, right immediately after that, they started what they call the Great Leap Forward, where they start the collective. And so they put all the means of production together, thinking that they're now going to live the socialist life. Well, that was a failure. And so it started the 3-year famine, which finishes in 1961. Nobody knows how many people died, but it had to be in the tens of millions actually died from starvation. So in 1962, they recovered from that, and then they find that people were very weak because they were malnutrition. Then they realized that, wait a minute, we do away with religion, but we also do away with some of the technique that allows us to maintain our health, the medical Qigong, the physical Qigong, all that. So why don't we bring it back? So they invented this word called Qigong, which is a secular way of practicing Qi without all the religious baggage. So in the process, in 1962, they outlawed any kind of spiritual Qigong and limited only for medical and physical. So today, when you think about Qigong, that's all you have. Is how to use the body, enhance the Qi so that you're more healthy, or one or the other. But no one ever talks about the spiritual part. But if you were to go back to what would be considered the patriarch of Taoism, Lao Tzu. Lao means old, Tzu means a scholar, somebody. And he was born, nobody really know. He was born in the 5th century BC, which is interesting, around the time when Buddha was alive. And he wrote a treatise, and some will argue that maybe he didn't write it, his student composed it, doesn't matter. But it's associated with him, called the Dao Ji Jing. And Dao means the way, De means virtuous, ethical. Jing means treatise. So it's the book, it's a classic on the way to be an ethical person. And you look at his writing. Look at his writing. And now, of course, everybody trying to interpret those writing. I'll make the argument that you cannot interpret those writings if you're focusing on only the body. You have to bring yourself to a different level. You have to bring yourself to a level where you are an awakened being. Okay? In fact, I'll make the argument that the message here is no different from the message in the Diamond Sutra. Look at the first line. It says, Tao, okay, I'm not going to say the Chinese, but it says the Tao that can be told is not the eternal, it's not the real Tao. Okay? So the minute you break an egg, it's no longer egg. Come on, trust me. Okay? The name can be named is not the real name. Okay? Now, people write books on interpreting that, but you interpret it based on us in a physical existence. I'll make the argument that forget it. You're not going to get there. This is about experience and not about physics, not about your deep into the 45th chapter. There's another one. It says, in pursuit of knowledge, every day progress is made. Right? So when we study, like we talk about Josh didn't like organized teaching all that much. But he didn't tell you the other part, which is that he studied a lot on his own.
Yes, and it's not. It's more that questioning some of the dogma, things that we
Yeah.
take for granted as a fact.
Yes.
And this text is great because you start, especially if you're doing a spiritual practice, you read it once and then you pick it up again maybe a year later, and you just get layers upon layers of new ways to see it and understand it, and depth and insight. So it's a good thing to just keep picking up and reading every once in a while because it's so multi-layered, so deep and profound. Kind of reminds me of some of the Zen koans too. You just can't approach it in certain
Right.
ways that we really want to.
It's all about the
everything else.
experience.
Yeah.
You have to experience it as opposed to trying to understand it through your logical. So what does it say? It says, in pursuit of knowledge, everyday progress is made. In the practice, in the pursuit of Qi, in the practice of Tao, everyday progress is lost. Now, if you study the Diamond Sutra has a structure where it says something is something, something is not something, therefore something is something. It's kind of weird. Yes, no, yes. What they're talking about is that three layers. And of course, Diamond Sutra is the sutra of the wisdom, is the Panya. It's the Panya. And so they actually talk about three layers of Panya. Panya that is on the words and the intellectual understanding. Panya that is based on the understanding. Not the understanding, sorry, let me back step. On the experience, direct experience. And Panya based on emptiness. So that's why it's ABAs, yes, no, yes. In other words, in the beginning, when I look at my finger, it's the finger. Later on, when I experience a finger, I realize that it's pointing to the moon, and the moon is what I'm looking at. Finally, when I understood emptiness, the moon and the finger is one of the same. Right? So this is what Taoism and Buddhism have in common, and they're not talking about the physical body. This is something that the communists or whoever, they can't understand it. The Western science can't understand that because they're looking at it in the wrong place. I'm going to take a break because I want to understand. I want to talk about samsara. I think samsara has gotten a bad name.
Denny, we probably need to wrap it up though in the next 15 minutes because I have to be somewhere at 2. I should have reminded you that on Tuesdays I have something to do at 2 here, and I need some travel time. But so I don't know. Do we want to break this because we're already 15 minutes over usual? Do we want to break this into 2 pieces, or we want to wrap it up?
15, let me try to do it in 15
Sure.
minutes, and I don't want to break it up. So quickly, samsara. What does samsara mean? Well, I want to go back to because I want to talk about science. I embrace science. I just understood it to be experimental science. So one of the famous scientists is Galileo. And what did Galileo do? Well, Galileo was studying the orientation of Jupiter and the moon and the sun and the earth, and he coordinated that with the rise of the tide. And he came up with this theory, which was against the church teaching, that it was the earth that circled around the sun and not the other way around. And for that, he was put in house arrest. Another scientist came along, Isaac Newton. Famous story about how he sat under the tree and an apple fall on his head and he discovered gravity, which is not true, but it's a good story. Interestingly, he did that because he was at home. He was actually sheltered in place because there was this great plaque in London. So he discovered gravitation, and he's basically he also had to invent calculus. And so he was describing what Galileo have observed, and he described the planetary motion and how Earth can sustain an orbit by velocity, and therefore which gives rise to the centrifugal force which counterbalance the gravitational force. Einstein came along. He's a troublemaker. He wasn't even trying to disprove Newton. That just came free. And what he was thinking about is that he was looking back at all the work that has been done until he came along. And he says, why do we assume that time is absolute? Why can't time be relative? In other words, Josh is sitting in St. Louis and I'm sitting in San Francisco. Why do we assume that 1 second of his time is 1 second of my time? There's no reason for that. And so he came up with what's called the relativity, where he made the assumption that only the speed of light is constant. The speed of light in St. Louis has to be the speed of light in San Francisco. But other than that, nothing is absolute, especially time. And so then he came up with this idea, this thing called the time dilations, that different parts of space can have different time. And he associated time with material. In other words, if you didn't have material, you didn't have this physical presence, then you don't have this rising and falling, right? People think, then there's no reason for time. Okay? And then he basically mapped the universe based on material and time, and he didn't actually come up with black hole, but people later on used his theory to come up with this concept of a black hole. In other words, you look at the universe, and you kind of think of the universe as time. There's a part where time is very long, and there's a part that's very short. And so if my time in San Francisco is very short, and the time in St. Louis is very long, so in other words, 1 second of my time is 2 seconds of his time, then Josh would live twice as long. So there's a tendency for me to run towards St. Louis, and that's called gravitational pull. So in Einstein's world, gravitational pull is not a law of physics, but rather a consequence of the time-space continuum, in that if you map out the universe in terms of its time, then there's a pull, there's a natural pull from the place where time is shorter to the place where time is longer, where until you reach the very end, where time is infinite, where there is no time. That's called a black hole.
Jump in here and say this relativity is still a theory, right? And then also the speed.
No, relativity itself is not a theory. Unfortunately, it was not proven when Einstein was alive. So even though Einstein had a Nobel Prize, he had a Nobel Prize for something else.
Okay. So is it the theorem of relativity now?
No. Relativity is proven, and without using relativity, none of our satellite would work.
Well, see, I'm trying to find out what the speed of time is as well.
Speed of light, I mean, yeah. Well, but what is not proven? What is not proven?
Speed of time. What is the speed of time? So. But that's one I haven't heard an answer to. The other thing is, though, even though these started out as mavericks and heretics, now they're mostly entrenched in scientific things. So where it's almost heretical now to question what was once heretical, which is now totally established. But we're not going to go into that now. So right?
Okay. So I want to continue because I am running out of time. So I want to talk about this concept of time dilation. This concept of relative time, because there's a very good movie and I watch it many times. The reason I like it so much is that the person who wrote the script and the person who was responsible for all the technical aspect was Professor Thorne from Caltech. And I did 3 years of visiting scientist at Caltech, and every summer I would see Professor Thorne and Professor Stephen Hawkins have lunch together, but they're in a different level. So we would have our own little table for kids, and they have the big table. And so Professor Thorne was the one that actually did this movie, and in there's a scene where the astronauts landed on this planet called Planet Miller, which was very close to the black hole, so time dilation dictate that they have a different time. And so they were going to be there for just like a few minutes. And because of this reason, they were there for 1 hour. And so when they returned back to the space vehicle, which was further away from the black hole, turns out that one of the colleagues who were the same age as they had become an elderly person, because he was there for 3 hours, so the person had already aged 21 years. Okay, so this is in the movie. It's based on relativity. It's based on time dilation. Now the Buddhists have similar discussions, and so we talk about this Diva realm, which is still in. I'll talk about that in a minute. Where this is like we talk about man, animal, hungry host. I'll come back in that minute. But there's a part where they can become divas. So divas would be like the angels. In Lord of the Rain, they would be like the people that had long ears that live a long time. What is that called? With the arrows?
Elves.
Elves.
Some
Yeah,
people
they would
call
be
them
like the
elves. Yeah.
elves, the angels, the wizard, that kind of thing. They're a little higher. And so in the Buddhist teaching, they said, well, at the very entry level, which is the realm of the four heavenly kings. So these are the four that are guarding the temple. In the Japanese temple, there's two. There's Om and Ah. And so every year would be every day there would be 50 years on Earth, and so forth and so on. So if you use that, then I'll make the argument that the planet, the Miller planet, and would be somewhere between here and here. Okay, so it's 168 years. So anyway, going beyond that, there's a whole host of teaching about time dilation and time space. So we actually live in three different realms, and now I'll explain why I talk about this in a minute. And the realms are divided into what is called the desire realm or the kama luka. So right here is the human being, right below is the human being, and above is the six different diva, right, where the gods live. And then down below, there's the hell, there's the animal, there's a hungry ghost, and then there's also the Azura. Now, if you were a Taoist, your purpose would be to come back in a form that is better than human. And better than human means that you start with the six diva realm inside the Kamaluka. And if you're lucky, you would reach further into this thing called the Rupa Luka, the form realm, where you no longer have the body. Form is not the body. Kaya is the body. Okay? Form is just the energy presence. So I'll make the argument that this one has the physical existence, and here is all energy existence. And here we have the first jhana, the second, and the third. And by the way, jhana translate into Chinese as chana, which became chan, which became zen. So when we say Zen meditation, that's our objective, is to go outside of the Kama realm.
Some people talk about it as subtle energy and subtle matter. So it's not the gross material matter we're accustomed with.
Yeah, actually that was there, and then I didn't want to put that in because I didn't want to explain it. And finally, you have the formless realm. So this is like, if you think of this as a soup, this is like the chicken soup with chunks, and this is like the broth, and this is like clean water. Okay, yeah, all right. Okay, now what's interesting is that this entire thing is called the Brahma realm. So when we do yoga in the United States, we do the Hatha yoga. It's all about the body. But when you go to India, it's about one with the Brahmins. Okay? Now, samsara is when your next life is within these three. So when you say spiritual Taoism, it's all about these three. When you talk about spiritual Buddhism, it's beyond these three. So the difference between Buddhism and Taoism is that the Taoists believe that there's body, and then there's chi body. There's the physical presence, and then there's the energy presence. The Buddhists believe that there is also a third, which is the presence of just the information, which is actually consistent with the quantum mechanics view of the world. That in addition to the conservation of energy, the conservation of matter, there's the conservation of information, what's called the quantum information. So we're not going to go through that too much. All right. So I hope I explained Taoist practice in terms of people practicing Taoist for medical, people practice Taoist for their physical health, for physical strength. People practice Taoist for Tao or Qi for strictly as knowledge, but there's one called the spiritual Taoist, which is not part of what the communists prefer. And so one of the questions you asked many years ago is Falun Gong, the Falun Gong? What is the deal with the Falun Gong? Because they gone beyond. They are now approaching. They're Qigong, but they gone beyond sort of the Hatha, borrowing the word Qigong, and go into spiritual Qigong. And for that, they're prosecuted. Okay, all right. So if Qigong was used only in the last 60 years, what was used before? And if you notice, Master never used the word Qigong. He used the word Daoyin. Now, interestingly, we translate into Dao as if the same as the Taoism, but in fact, it's a different Dao. Now, this word is really, really amazing. The part above here is Dao, as in the way. Let's break down this word. This part is made of two parts. This one is the head. This one is the vehicle. So Dao is in the path is your head walking along with using the right vehicle. This one, Dao Yin, they add something else to it, which means inch. So this is guiding someone along the path, inch by inch. So Dao Yin means to guide. But it's not just Dao, it's Yin. Yin means to entice, which is a little different from Dao. In fact, it's the same word that we use for threading the needle. So if you want to successfully thread the needle, you got to start with the thread and the needle. And so Dao Yin is a way of enhancing and discovering and developing our qi requires both guidance and enticement. In other words, your qi is already with you. You just have to bring it out. And so very interestingly, there's a lot of talk about how Daoyin is 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 years old. I'll just go with what is actually provable, which is that in 1973, they actually discovered a set of silk painting, which when they do the carbon dating is 168 BC. Okay, so it's about 2,200 years. Okay, so this is the first record. They said that there are others, but this is the most authoritative record. And people actually can reconstruct that, and they discovered that there's actually 44 figures in either standing or sitting postures, all practicing exercise, all for the purpose of maintaining health and preventing disease. Okay? The last slide is, what does that have to do with us? Right? What does that have to do with us? Us meaning like Buddhist meditators. And I go back to what I said last weekend when I said, we practice Tao as a journey, not as a destination. Because what we really want to do is to escape samsara. Not in this life maybe, but ultimately. So that we're no longer chained by our body. Right? We're now into this pure form. So that's why I call it it's emancipation. You don't liberate a slave, you emancipate a slave. You just have to stop and chaining them, right? We just have to stop chaining ourselves to this physical presence. So this actually came from Tao. So you see Tao is very close to Buddhism if depending on how you look at it. So the first one says so they break down our existence into Jing, Qi, and Sun. Jing is essence. This is what I call the original essence. But for most people, that's just the body. Okay, so let's not be so restricted. And just say our existence is the body, the physical presence, the qi, the energy body, the qi body, and then finally the mind. Which remember last time when we were talking about the mind, that in the Buddhist, the pure mind is all information, is all karma versus attachment, right? So if I translate this, it says it's 3 steps, but it's not 1, 2, 3. It's actually triad. So you keep going back in circle. Okay. So you practice mindfulness of the body in order to enhance your qi. So that's what we do in the first half hour. Then you keep practicing your qi in order to unleash your mind. And then finally, you reach a point where you emancipate your mind, you free your mind, you liberate your mind, if not to attain emptiness, to at least attain equanimity.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Denny, that was so cool. Thanks so much. Learned a lot, and then wanted to say, yeah, to practice this to eventually at least keep a human rebirth, if not a higher rebirth, until final emancipation, nibbana, nirvana, where it's out of the cycle altogether, right?
I think if you go back to the chart that was put together by Dr.
Mhm.
Yang, we
Mhm.
could put a three-dimensional chart
Okay.
so that you have the body, the chi, and the mind, and you can choose. You can choose to focus more on the body, more on the chi, and then with
Yes.
that, eventually walk down the third axis, which is the mind. So,
To
so
keep
it's
things in balance, right? Yes.
but the most important thing is back to the first slide that this is all about experience and not about
Yes.
knowledge.
Well, that is in
You
line with the
can you
Buddhist thing, and that's what I wanted
yeah.
to leave on here. And I just want to throw out some questions we're not going to have time to answer right now, but related that we might do in the show notes, might not. How are these energy points and meridians, determined? Like it's something we could probably never answer because, like, their
Through
experience.
it's through experience. It's
Yes,
through experience.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, if you just look at the development of the meridians and
Mhm.
the pressure points, we actually had some of that in the early ons, and then eventually it really came about after Bodhidharma.
Gotcha. Okay,
It's
well, I'm
just
just gonna we're really out of time here. I just gonna
yeah.
throw these out here. The resources, we can maybe put some resources for people that are starting to study, and then if anybody wants to involve themselves in or seek out maybe practitioners for therapy things as well that we talked about earlier. The blockages and how chi blockages could form and how they can be done. The other dynamic I found was really interesting was how certain things in the body, if you put certain physical things in the body, it can affect chi and vice versa, right? The chi can affect the
Yeah.
physical body, and how there's a separation, but they're closely interrelated. And then you've talked about before the breath in relation to the chi. And then let's see
Yeah, give us
yeah,
some feedback so we know what to do, in the
yeah.
next one. But I think we should
Okay.
probably end. And so
Yes.
if I may, I want to end with something that you taught me, which is the
Well, hang on
signal.
just one second. The
Yeah.
thing I said I wanted to read the Kalama Sutra. So here's just one a few lines here. He says, "Do not go by reports, by legends, by traditions, by
Yes. Thank
scripture,
you. Thank
by
you.
logical conjecture, by
Yes.
inference, by
Yes.
analogies, by agreement through
Yes.
pondering views, by
Yes.
probability, or by the thought this contemplative is our teacher. When you know for yourselves that these qualities are skillful,
Yes.
these
Thank you for that.
qualities are blameless, these
Yeah.
qualities are praised by the wise, these qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to the welfare and to happiness. Then you should enter and remain in them."
Yes. Yes. It again, to summarize, experience.
Exactly.
Experience for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
A
What is that
Pacifico
called?
coming.
I'm trying to look for it. I'm sure I won't find it. But what is it called when he makes the hand? It's called pasico. Ihi pasico.
A Pacifico, come and see for yourself. Don't
Come and see
believe
for
me.
yourself. That's what
Yeah,
we're
don't
asking: is
believe
come
me.
to
Here's
see
some
for
stuff I
yourself.
learned. Here's some
Yeah.
stuff I learned.
So
Check it out for
so
yourself.
yeah,
Don't take my
exactly,
word for
exactly.
it.
So
Yeah,
if you stay with us hour and a half now, comes to see for yourself every
exactly.
Saturday at 8 o'clock. Josh and I, we have a practice that we do through Insight Timer, where we get most of our fellow practitioners, YouTube, Facebook, and go on. Just look for us every Saturday, 8 o'clock Pacific time. Come see for yourself. E.B. Pasico.
Hey, Bosco, yes. And if you want to follow Denny's work, it's you search Denny K Mew on the internet, and then you want
Yeah.
to search my work.
Actually, at the bottom of the screen, we
That's
have
right.
dennykmu.com AUA. That's what Josh and I do every week, every last Tuesday of the month. So come back for this. Next
And
time,
for my
ask questions. Yeah.
and for my work, if this is just the audio version, you just listen to audio. It's search integrating presence, and if you can't find it, search my name, Josh
Yep.
Dippold, along with it. So, all right,
Okay.
Denny, thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you.